right? So we are going to just do a little quick introduction. I'm Sara Prendergast-Wallace. I run the Fab Lab programs in Cleveland, Ohio for our public schools. Thank you for coming to our first summer summit with EduFab and our little kickoff teacher panel for today. With me, I have Alethea Campbell. She's in Boston, formerly of the Fab Foundation, and just overall killing it as a teacher and a maker. We've got 5, maybe 6 really great panelists to share with you today. And of course, we have Liz Whitewolf, our EduFab leader in Crazy. We'll just go with that. We're going to take about a half hour. Each of our panelists are going to have 5 minutes to talk about their program and to share one of their favorite projects with you. So we're going to kind of keep it quick, but we're really thinking about how to share as many networking opportunities. All these pictures you see on here are Fab friends. We all know that we get the most out of our network when we can be together and we can be social and friendly and really learn from each other's mistakes and our best practices as well. So we're going to have some time at the end to network to make sure today and tomorrow you guys can really get the most out of what we're here for. So we're going to start today with, sorry, I switched my screen so you could see my lab in the background and I keep going in the wrong direction. So we've got Mickie Flores coming to us from Maine in the United States, Olivio Guedes Filho and Mauricio Alves de Salva from Brazil, Corey Rice in Connecticut, Ilaria de la Manna in Qatar, and Sara Caviar in California. And we're going to hear from Mickie first. So Hi, go ahead, Mickie, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about my affiliation with Fab Lab. I retired this June from teaching after 40 years, but I've been teaching middle school science in Deer Isle Stonington Elementary School in Maine since 2011. I have partnered with Haystack Mountain School of Crafts and the Fab Lab for the next 9 years. My introduction to digital fabrication began when I took the Fab Academy course at MIT in 2014. Later, if one follows the link, which I've put in the chat, you will quickly realize that I am primarily a science classroom teacher, and the mechanisms, applications, and implications of digital fabrication were all very, very new to me. At first, we offered Saturday workshops as an opportunity to connect children with fabrication. Transportation and scheduling were problematic, and happily for me, Haystack was able to provide personnel and machines to come directly into the school for a 4-week span of time every year. As the curriculum focus changed, the Fab Lab project changed as well. The age of the students involved ranged from 10 years old to 13 years old. I teach on an island which is geographically and economically isolated. Therefore, Fab Lab has brought 21st century skills to children who otherwise might not experience the possibilities of fabrication until college. The photo shows me leading a group of 5th graders on our nature trail. We are surrounded by fantasy creatures, which they designed and which were then cut out on a CNC router. The students painted their creatures in art class, integrating fabrication with craft. The project was an entry point to their understanding of the possibilities ahead. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this was, we were studying electricity and magnetism. This project was part of a curriculum developed by the Make to Learn group at the University of Virginia. Students learned about electricity and magnetism through the construction of a linear motor, which is shown in the picture. They then used CAD software, Fusion 360, to design their own articulating diorama that would integrate with the linear motor invention kit framework. Students then took a field trip to Haystack Mountain School of Crafts and fabricated these using a laser cutter. This project spanned about 2 weeks of class time, with most of the time used to design their inventions in Fusion 360. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mickie. This project looks very, very cool. And I gotta say, elementary school students using Fusion makes me excited. Alethea did put it in the chat, but as folks are talking, if any of you have any questions, just drop everything into the chat. We are going to have some question and answer sessions as we go. And Alethea is going to kind of keep her eye on that for us. Okay, next we are going to hear from Olivio and Mauricio in Brazil.
Bom dia, ou boa tarde.
So I will translate for Olivio. He's giving to you all good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time frame.
Bom, o nosso trabalho aqui na escola, né, é um trabalho relativamente novo, porque essa metodologia é uma metodologia que chega nova para nós, as escolas públicas brasileiras.
So this is a public school. It's from the south of Brazil, and it's a kind of new project. The schools are just now receiving digital materials to work. Okay.
Eu trouxe dois trabalhos para apresentar que a gente tem trabalhado com muito êxito nas escolas, na nossa escola.
He'll show to us two projects that are doing well on his school.
É o Fábrica Criativa, que foi desenvolvido junto com o professor André e com o apoio do Núcleo de Tecnologia e Educação da 27ª Coordenadoria.
So the first one is called Creative Factory. It was developed together with the Federal Institute of Education, Science and Technology and the Hub for Technology for the state public schools.
O Brasil vem passando por uma mudança de metodologia no seu ensino médio.
Brazil is facing a shift in the methodology in the high school.
E com isso, nós estamos usando o projeto em algumas disciplinas novas do currículo.
So we have new courses, and we are using the technology in order to teach those new disciplines, those new courses.
Onde os alunos, então, usando o espaço do laboratório de fabricação digital,
where the students use the digital fabrication space that you see in the picture.
Eles podem transformar o que é abstrato nas disciplinas.
They can transform the abstract things they are teaching the disciplines in the courses into concrete things.
Em elementos concretos.
Okay.
Esses elementos, por exemplo, né, uma molécula de metano fabricada por
a methane molecule was developed by them.
E assim eles desenvolvem o seu trabalho. Outro projeto é o uso da robótica educacional.
So develop those kinds of things. They learn about molecules and things, so they can try to fabricate them. Another project, it's about educational robotics.
O que faz com que nós tenhamos aguce a curiosidade, a descoberta, a prática, a construção com os alunos principalmente do ensino médio e fundamental.
Where they use and practice using robotics through all the educational until high school, from the beginning of the education until high school.
Como eu disse, são projetos que são relativamente novos, porque o Brasil, por ser um país subdesenvolvido, investe muito pouco em novas metodologias.
So this, as he said, it's a new kind of project, as we need more funding in order to bring more technology into public schools.
Então essas iniciativas, elas são muito mais das escolas em tentar trazer novas metodologias.
Yeah, those kinds of projects, they are bring up by teachers mostly. So the teachers they have the ideas and think about projects instead of being a program that is top down. So it's more bottom up kind of projects than top down.
Mas ele vem surtindo esses bons resultados com os alunos e fazendo uma mudança de paradigma na educação pública brasileira.
So this kind of initiative from the teachers are changing the ways of the use of technology into schools, and they are very well received by the students that want those kinds of projects. So this is being really a positive change in our culture in teaching.
Eu não sei se os meus 5 minutos já passou, André.
Tem mais 20 segundos.
20 segundos, então. Como eu falei, a falta de incentivo governamental, né, muitas vezes nos barra que a gente consiga desenvolver projetos muito maiores do que a gente consegue fazer hoje. Mas nós, aqui, especialmente no Rio Grande do Sul e aqui na nossa coordenadoria, temos o apoio muito próximo do Núcleo de Tecnologia e Educação, que incentiva esse tipo de ações e com inovações tecnológicas.
So despite the fact that there isn't a great amount of incentive and budget from the government in order to do these kinds of projects, the fact that the teachers are getting together to exchange practices and creating those kinds of hubs of technology where they can do a lot of technological projects inside school. So it's really a bottom-up approach that we can see taking form into Brazilian public schools. Okay, I guess that's it. Obrigado, Olivio.
Obrigado.
Thank you, Andre and Olivio. I am very inspired by the grassroots part of that. I think a lot of across the world, we've got a lot of teachers who are working hard to do fab things, even if they're government and principals and all those people don't necessarily, maybe not on board yet, but we're working on it. Okay, next, oops, sorry, I'm skipping one. We've got Ilaria.
Hi, everyone. So yes, thank you, Sara and Litz, for inviting me here. It's nice to see online all these people. So for the one they don't know me, I'm in the field of Fab Lab since 2009, and in 2013 I start to focus more on education with digital fabrication for students, and I switched in different Fab Lab and working globally with kids around the world. So from the last 3 years and a half now, I'm in Qatar. I'm Italian based now in Qatar, working for a Fab Lab that is designed just for youth from 7 to 10, and is also a governmental Fab Lab that it's sponsor and it's designed by the Ministry of Communication and Information Technologies. So actually, I heard all of you probably are teachers, but actually I'm an architect that after several years using digital fabrication for myself, I thought was super interesting to see the reaction of students, how they deal and how they see digital fabrication and electronics in a different way. So the Fab Lab that we have in Qatar, it's helped and makes the youth to be solving problems through technologies. And it's interesting also how our governmental space, it's open, so everything it's free, and it's open to other institutions of governmental and not, so private and not private sector for the city. So we are collaborating with library, with museum, and of course also with school that they contact us, private school and public school. And we have different program of different age groups and different zone, also related to software, not just digital fabrication and robotics. And for example, in the last 3 years, we achieved a lot of Qatari makers. We are running almost every month a different workshop. In the pandemic time online, but now we are fully back on site. And today I would like to introduce a new collaboration that was very interesting for us. So next slide, please. We collaborate with the Al Noor Institute. It's an institute that has actually inside has different schools that are related to blind. So we had the first meeting to talk about how we can introduce technologies and how we can stimulate them kids using technology. And the theme was related to art and science. So actually how we can use some of the tools to express. And it was very interesting, this collaboration, and very difficult. We had one program that was with kids that are blind and they have mental problems. So for example, they have the mental head, they have 11 years, but their mental, it's 3-4 years old. And you can see in the first here with Mickie, probably every one of you knows Mickie, but we couldn't connect some different object of every day. So they have a lot, the hands and the sense of touch, they have developed a lot. So of course, they will recognize the difference of Play-Doh with the difference of apple and the difference of a ball made of film. So they have, and the gummy bears. So they have like eyes inside them, fingers. And they were enjoying, like they couldn't be controlling a piano, just touching a different object. And this we did this workshop, actually activity, with the completely blind and had mental health. When we went there, it's amazing the way that they learn. They write in Braille, they see like the solar system with the Braille. And of course, you can see these two pictures of flowers with inside some papers. Like, so they fill the drawings and they put inside these papers. And the last picture here, you can see a small doll. So this was made by a girl that she never saw and see a person, and she could design with their hands this small doll with arms and eyes. And this was like very inspiring to us to make the collaboration, to try to make out some creativity from them. So in the second picture, there are little bits. We make a DJ party. So we printed in Braille some waves to teach them the different sounds waves. And with the little bits, we make them with the buzzer and different tones. We make them teach and play with the different wave, and the result was amazing. And this, they were just blind. And in the third picture, there is a Minecraft. So we had also a group of kids that they are low visions, so they can see little bits and they experiment, so they can see in a big screen and that they can see the contrast. So they were developing a Minecraft character and very excited to do it. I have a short video just to see the outcomes of it, and yes, was a very interesting combination between technologies and the understanding of them. Thank you, Sara. So yes, yes, the video have sound, but it's okay. Yes, don't worry. They were just playing the instruments, and this one, they understand a little bit very well. They understand the connection. It was amazing how they couldn't use technology and express themselves. Thank you so much. I don't know if somebody has questions. This I also, yes, thanks to share also this video. This is our last workshop of art and science that we did a collaboration with a museum. So we use microscopes and ferrofluids to analyze in a microscopes the phenomenon of ferrofluids, and then they had the experience of translating the microfluids movement in augmented reality application. So these are the micro picture, and then they in Unity discovered how to make the picture interactive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilaria. That was very, very interesting. And I feel like all those things would be just as great with seeing students as well as students visually impaired. Okay, we're a little out of order now. Sorry, I mixed them up, but next we have Sara Caviar from the Seven Arrows School in California.
All right, thanks. Hi, everybody. So I've been a maker all my life, and I used to work in a pretty technological field in filmmaking. And then about 22 years ago, I got into education and brought my love of creation to education. And when I was in film, it was also pre-computer assisted special effects, sound effects, although it trickled into that. So when I started in education, I really wanted to open a lot of doors for students to help them understand that you can make what you set your mind to making. And so we do have, we're a real small school at this particular school that I'm at, but we do have 3 different makerspace areas. We're kindergarten through 6th grade, so 5-year-olds to 11-year-olds. And our 3 spaces are really set up separately with developmentally appropriate tools in each area. And we're a private school, so we have a lot of resources, which is really nice. But we work with very low tech resources and all the way to pretty high tech resources with laser cutters and 3D printers and the like. So one of the, I guess we can go on to our next slide. One of my favorite projects most recently, and actually, let me just backtrack a little bit. My role at the school is not to teach maker classes just in and of themselves. What I do is I work with teachers to try to integrate making into different subject areas. And we've been pretty successful in doing that, of course, in science, which we call STEAM. That's pretty easy. But we've also been able to integrate making into math classes, language arts classes, and social studies classes. Still haven't done it with Spanish yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. So this slide here is an example of a project that we did. Our 4th graders learn about California history and the gold rush, and coming cross country in covered wagon. And instead of having children work with pre-made kits where they're just simply putting pieces together, we combined this with a math project where the children drew and designed a covered wagon after having looked at a number of real ones. And they had to really create everything to scale. And then I cut the pieces out on a laser cutter, and the growth for them was really interesting because you can see the wheels. That took several passes for them to understand that if you're going to have an axle, you have to have a center area holding the axle as well as a rim for the wheel to turn. So this particular project is just one example of quite a number of ones that we do in multiple subject areas. Another one that we do in 4th grade, they're learning about children with different abilities, and they visit a playground that's set up for differently abled children. And then we have them go through a design thinking process wherein they design their own differently abled playground. During that process, we work with all kinds of pretty low-tech materials, construction paper, pipe cleaners, but I also have them design certain elements on our 3D printers. We use Tinkercad mostly for our files for our 3D printers. It's just an easier format for our kids to begin to learn how to do 3D modeling. And so they'll design particular things like a certain kind of slide or a certain kind of chair that might be suitable for a child in a wheelchair or a child that might be blind, et cetera. So we do so many different projects, but we don't do too many standalone innovation projects, with the sole exception of our 6th grade. And actually, if you go back one slide, in this particular slide, you'll see a child learning how to solder, and yeah, that's pretty much it from the 6th grade. But they do an innovation project in 6th grade, wherein we've front loaded a fair number of tech skills, whether it might be, soldering or using, electronics, or they may be doing something with Instamorph, all the way down to some fairly low tech fabrication pieces such as wet felting and needle felting. And then they work with a budget, they create a budget, they find investors, and they create a prototype that they get feedback on, and then they manufacture and sell to the school community in an effort to raise money for their ethical leadership projects. So in the selling of their items, they get to describe why they're raising money for the project that they're supporting. And it ranges, it's whatever they're interested in is, everything from climate change to at-risk schools, that kind of thing. So what has been probably the most challenging at our school is helping the teachers feel like they can have a very, very strong role in the making that's happening in their particular classroom. Have been working with these teachers for a long time, and just trying to build their confidence that they too, even if they are not confident in 3D printing or the laser cutter, but that they too can have, they don't have to sit back and watch as the innovation teacher comes in and works with the students. And we've made a lot of progress in that area. So I'm really pleased to report. So, and that's, we could probably go on for 2 hours, but I will let the next speaker have their chance.
That's the hardest part, right? When I asked everyone to share one project, I think every single person came back with, wait, one? I get one slide? That's the hard part, exactly. All right, thank you so much, Sarah. Next, we're going to hear from Corey Rice in Connecticut.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Corey Rice, and I'm a high school science teacher, chemistry, physics. And I am currently in Connecticut, but I used to be Sarah's neighbor back in Cleveland. Miss you. And I teach, so like I said, teach high school science, but I also did Fab Academy. And so I'm a Fab Academy graduate and have been able to use those skills within the classroom. And so it's been lots of fun to be able to find different places where a Fab Lab can fit with the school, to find ways to integrate that with the school community is where I did it first. And then when I moved to Connecticut, where I am now, I've been working with the school where I'm at and some community maker spaces to try and make sure that education goals happen in all sorts of different ways. These are just some of the cool projects because I try to sneak in more than Sarah wanted me to have. Things that you can do, some sewing and textiles, that glowy jacket, a lot of science Olympiad projects. I work a lot with after school clubs and kids that have big projects and big ideas. So that's fun. This instrument we're going to see a little bit more about. In the bottom right, those are some students that built GPS motion trackers that we took on roller coasters. That was done in collaboration with my engineering students and some math students, so that my students collected a lot of positional information as they rode the rides, and then they handed it off to the math students who could take that information and graph it out as piecewise functions and try and come up with some cool graphs from that data. So let's see, we can go on to the next slide. And really, I would say, especially over the past couple of years, my work has been able to focus on the intersection of education in the labs and like how those two things come together. And I feel like in moving, I've been able to look at it in lots of different ways. First off, over there on the right, I've got a whole bunch of content for an adult maker class that I teach. And so I just dropped a link into the chat. That's a folder of a bunch of slides that I've produced that is just piles of content. I teach a year-long class to adults, hobbyists in a makerspace in the community here in Makehaven called in the community of New Haven called Makehaven. Everything's a haven here. And so I teach that. That's a year long. I do that at night. That's lots of fun. Then during the day, I am always in that struggle of how does curriculum fit in with your Fab Lab? And so sometimes you have a class project that really just fits, and like we can do it in the Fab Lab and it goes really quickly. Like this, the little GIF in the bottom, that was a motion study trying to look at how you'd have just a mechanism work and get a little motion to tell a short story. And so that was kind of fun. And some of them are sort of bigger projects. So there's all sorts of things there. I'm very lucky to have a new challenge. The school where I'm at is putting in a lab. And so we sort of got to engineer it in a reverse way. We took a look at all of the curriculum that we have currently and that we can see for the near future, and then tried to choose the lab equipment that would best help us do that. And so that meant that we got a lot more video production equipment, podcasting equipment, a fair amount more for that recording and presenting side than I've seen in a lot of labs. So that's been really interesting to think about that. And then we're going to be rolling out a lot of teacher professional development over the course of the year. And it's like you've said, not every school is super supportive. There's some institutional pieces that are there. I'm lucky that the school is on board. But you're never going to be I imagine this perfect world where everyone's just excited and lets you go. There's always going to be hiccups. And that's one of the fun challenges, is trying to figure out ways to get around that, whether it's a person who's excited or interested and a little afraid, or whether it's trying to get things through the administrative end or finding money. There's all sorts of challenges. And it's really been, I feel like the past 5 years have been trying to find a way to play whack-a-mole on whatever challenge pops up and move on to the next one. So you can just keep doing cool things to get kids inspired. And so if we go to the next slide, here's like one narrative sort of story that makes it a little bit better. With Science Olympiad, with my club students, where they do after school club, Science Olympiad is great. If you're in the States, it's a national competition. I had some students who did sounds of music. And so for that, you need to build an instrument from scratch. The only thing you can use are like guitar strings. And so these students, over a period of 2 years, they're building the best instrument that they can. So they started off with just sort of basic skills, quickly building a box for a guitar to see how that would work. And you can see they went through 4 or 5 different versions of what this might look like. And having the ability to have a long-term discussion with kids about big projects like this is really magical. If you haven't had a chance yet to find an opportunity for this in your space, I would really encourage it. It's really good for kids to go through that process of design and build, design and try something, find that they've gone down a wrong path, and then make a big change. All of that is really, really important. It's really great to have students come up with their own need for, I need to learn how to 3D model this thing. I need to learn how to process it on a CNC machine. Now I need to figure out how to do some metalworking so I can adjust the aluminum things and make some connections. There's all sorts of cool opportunities for a big years long project to really be a good way for kids to naturally want to develop those skills on their own. And so I think thinking about, if you haven't yet, really think about learners in a years long sort of context. There's a lot of opportunity there to try and make sure that the interesting things happen. We don't all get to have that interaction with kids, but being a high school teacher, sometimes I get to see kids for multiple years in a row. And so it's a really neat way for them to build up their skills over a longer period of time with all this digital fabrication stuff, so that they can pursue it in college, or they can find ways to apply it. Even if it's sort of ancillary, it can help support whatever it is that they're going to go do. So there's all sorts of cool stuff that I've gotten entangled with. And these are just some of the fun projects. Like everybody else, I could go on for a long time. Also super impressed with all the presenters, just want to say. So.
Thanks, Corey. I got to say, right, for the past 6 years, I've been running a mobile Fab Lab where I'm going and working with kids for anywhere between 1 day to maybe 4 days. 4 days is like the maximum amount of time. So thinking about what I could possibly do in 4 years versus 4 days, I'm very, very jealous. Okay, thank you very much to all of our panelists for sharing a little bit about the work that you do and some of your favorite projects. And it wouldn't be a good panel unless we got some advice from them to everyone else here and sharing best practices. So we asked each of our panelists 3 questions. The first of which is, how can educators get started in this world for folks who are interested, but maybe aren't all the way, maybe they don't have a lab, they don't really know what they're doing. Here are some of the blurbs that I was able to grab from people's answers. But do any one of our panelists, would one of you like to kind of just tell a little bit about how you got started in the Fab world? Don't make me call on you.
Well, I wouldn't mind just weighing in on the resources piece, because I mean, I am at a school where we're really lucky to have a lot of resources, but one of the nicest things that happened over a period of a number of years was we had a parent who was one of those, her career was to go in and clear out clutter in people's homes. And so she brought the clutter to me, and it was so nice getting all this junk that our kids could use. And, you know, it was so separate from, you know, I mean, they could recognize bits and pieces of it. And of course, we purchased stuff like, you know, wood bits and all that. But just even if you don't have the resources to buy expensive laser cutters or anything like that, you can always ask around and get people to donate. I mean, everybody's got a junk drawer, and they're probably delighted to stick it in a garbage bag and give it to you. And so just having kids be able to invent using buttons and pen tops and lids and springs and, you know, anything that isn't dangerous is just a really great way to get started.
Another thing that's really great for people getting started is to just get going. And maybe we're preaching to the choir here. I love I didn't add it, but go to tinkercad.com and just start learning how to model. Just start playing with things. A lot of the resources that feel like the secret sauce are free online resources. So Tinkercad or Inkscape or Fusion 360 has fantastic education accounts. There's all sorts of cool things that you can do just to get in and start playing around.
Absolutely. I think that go to tinkercad.com is excellent advice. Maybe it's because I typed it, but I think if you don't have a 3D printer in your school yet and you really want one, getting all of your kids to design amazing things in Tinkercad and then going to your principal or going to your PTO and saying, hey, look at all these wonderful things we've made for $500, we can get a cheap printer and bring some of these to life. That's kind of hard to say no to.
A friend here in Connecticut had his third graders designing like animal enclosures in Tinkercad, not because he was ever going to 3D print them, but because it was a good way for them to make like a little diorama without nearly the amount of mess. I think it was like his crowning very nice project of COVID times when you had to be remote. But he's kept it just because it's great. Kids can model whatever they want. You don't have to go digging through trash to find the random little plastic figurines of a lion. So.
And paper engineering, so good.
If I can contribute a little bit about this, to start, I guess one of the things that we talk a lot in Brazil is that the machines aren't the most important part of the space. The people in the community is the most important part of the space. So try to find out some tools, low-tech material, discover in your community, in your neighborhood, who has material that can be used in a maker project. You don't have to buy stuff. You can collect, you can discover about your community, you can discover about your neighborhood, about the families of your students. So try to put together materials and tools and try to figure out things to do that make sense to you. So it's not about the machines, it's about people. This is the most important part. We talk a lot about that. And then after that, of course, you can try to find out ways to achieve machines and more expensive tools. But as a jump start, you can think about this kind of project.
I'm super agree with Andre. I had the experience of several years working in Latin America, and it's not easy. but like the network of people, of course, it helps and is the best. Like some people have machine, and we collaborate a lot with the material company that probably you will make an event and just sharing them logo in a big public event, and they will provide materials. So also connecting and sponsoring, it's not easy at all, but it works. So yes, I'm agree.
Makers got to hustle a little bit. You got to get all the stuff and see what you can make. When I was in the classroom, I used any money that the PTO would give me to buy pizza instead of buying stuff, because I knew I could use the pizza to get the kids to stay after school, and then they would bring in all of the junk, or we would go and raid the recycle pile to find materials. So, pizza and cardboard. With those two things, you'd be surprised what kids can make. Okay, our next
cardboard of the pizza also.
Yeah. The cardboard of the pizza. Excellent point, Ilaria. Our next question was, how can we better incorporate standards and content into projects? I think this question is particularly focused on those who might have the administrators, like we've spoken about, who maybe aren't totally on board and don't drink the Maker Kool-Aid yet. So we need to make sure our projects are hitting some of those specific things that the administration wants to see. So there's a bunch of great stuff, great tips in here on how we can have content-focused projects, or maybe not content-focused, but content visible projects. Any thoughts on standards and projects from our panelists?
Well, I'm happy to talk about the one I really focused on, which was the soft skills or critical thinking skills. We know that that's what employers are looking for. And I don't think that's too hard to sell for administrators to understand how collaboration, perspective taking, iteration, risk taking, all those things are super critical. I do think you can fold in the content standards from any subject that you're crossing over into, whether it might be STEAM, using the modeling component of NGSS or whatever. But I think these ones, I think it's really critical to propose that to your administrators, that these, what we might call soft skills or the critical thinking skills, are some of the most important standards that a child is going to learn in school. And through something like an iterative process, they're going to develop those. I also think too, one of the things we've tried to start that I think is important is to do a student survey before and after a project. So, because a lot of times it's very hard to gauge that kind of growth. It's hard to measure it exactly, but getting student feedback is a good place to start, I think.
So I would say Fab Lab projects adapt across content areas, absolutely. But because I am the science teacher and we have a nature trail, we have spent quite a bit of time just connecting those two things. So we use the next generation science standards, the life science standards, and think about what I'm trying to teach. One year, the students created a laser cut mural depicting the local flora and fauna. Another year, they all picked a different organism that was out there and designed a sticker that was vinyl cut and then put on a t-shirt. So they had a t-shirt of something with a common name and a scientific name. I think that the connections are there, ready to be made.
Vamos lá, André. André, tá por aí?
Claro, vai lá, vai que eu traduzo.
Tá.
I will translate.
Então, a minha dica, eu acho que primeiro é a gente tentar entender as habilidades e competências que o aluno precisa ser atingido. né? Para
Olivio
poder...
is going in the same direction. I'll translate. He's saying that the first thing is to try to understand the directions that the student is going. So try to understand the student.
E depois, qual ação é mais eficaz para a gente poder encontrar que ele encontre de forma mais prática, né, essas habilidades e competências, né, consiga de forma mais assertiva acertarmos essas habilidades e competências do aluno.
And only after that, try to find out which actions you could take with the students in order for them to achieve the competencies and the skills that are needed in order to do the activity.
É isso aí, André. Obrigado.
And that's it. Thank you.
One, just to quickly weigh in, one thing that's cool about this is that it's great to have opportunities for nerdy, geeky conversations about content. And I love that part of a lab. But one of the things that's sort of a spin-off from this is that when you have that, because in a lab often makes it possible for that to be visible in some way that's hard to do in a classroom. And so I think using the space to make a visible expression of understanding is really, really helpful in getting kids to see what they've done. And then also sort of in a success beget success sort of way, right? As you produce more cool things, people get excited about it, then more cool things happening, and people get more excited. And then eventually, you know, you get a little reputation of like, oh yeah, we can support your program. All those things sort of spiral in the way that you want them to. And so finding ways to really just lean in hard to the content in your projects and make it very visible. The kids are learning, talking about what they're doing. I think you can really do a lot of different cool content driven things. And I would suggest everybody to just make it very visible what's happened at the end and definitely show it off so that everybody knows the cool stuff you've been up to.
Demonstrations of learning are so important, and giving the kids the opportunity to stand up and talk about, look at what I made, and not just saying, here is the robot, but let me talk about the process that the students went through and what they learned through that process. I think we get asked a lot about how do you track these skills and what did they actually learn? And you're right, like Sara said, those are really hard to track. And I think that even those of us who've been doing this for years are still struggling to answer that question. But I think that you can transfer the tracking to easier to track stuff. Maybe students, we can't see how their design skills are improved by how they're doing on their math test, but we can see that their attendance has improved, and that overall like school culture has improved because we're incorporating these kinds of projects into the culture of the school. Okay, thank you, everyone. Our last question was just about general tips, our best fab tips, which I thought reading them, they were all very similar of like, just be a nerd, be your nerdy self. I think we all have our nerdy side from time to time. Anything anyone would like to add about this?
I love the blue script that says that it's more excitement is generated when students can wear their project or give it as a gift, because that certainly is how we start. We let the students design something first for themselves, and then we approach the more complex culminating project. So I think that's very much true.
I had recommended front loading some of the skills so that children have choices in how to pursue what they're creating. And that takes time, and that's always the hardest thing, is to find out, you know, when do you get that time to be able to teach them how to do things like Instamorph or soldering or Tinkercad. But if you can get those at least done up front in the first couple of months, even of a year, then they know they have choice later in how, in what format they want to create. And I think that goes a really long way with not just engagement, but also really bringing out creativity in kids.
I'm a big fan of trying to find ways to lower the stakes so that creativity can be expressed also. Sarah, I think you got a great point. There's a couple of things that I do for that. I try and make sure that I say your first one is just to learn. Like if you're going to make something, you should be ready to make it 2 or 3 times if you can. Again, I have a long time with kids, so that's okay to make something and it doesn't work out. You can learn from it and try and make it better the next time. And make sure that it's okay to just sort of nerd out on that process. If you've got a shorter timetable, it's okay to just like move through real quickly. I find that when I'm constrained for time, the kids will usually learn faster than I can teach. So find ways to show them what they can do and then get out of the way and let them learn on their own faster than I could possibly show it to them.
I love that. Get out of the way and let them learn. If only we could do that all the time. Or if only they could like learn how to find a derivative on their own too. Okay, so we are going to do some question and answers and networking. So if there are any questions that folks have in the chat, or Alethea, did anything come up that we need to address?
Yes, so I was keeping track of some of the questions. I know for Mickie at the beginning, and I don't believe you answered this completely in the chat, but it was, how did you facilitate the partnership between your school and the Fab Lab was one of the bigger questions. And then I feel like that would be a good place to start, and I can pop up with other ones.
I start with a meeting every summer with the director of the local Fab Lab. And we look at the science discipline that I'm going to be teaching that year, whether it's earth science, life science, or physical science. We think about the time of year that the Fab Lab and Haystack can come in, which tends to be the winter months. And I think about what units I'm teaching. And we also try to rotate the machines. So if we use the 3D printer last year, we want to use the laser cutter this year, maybe the vinyl cutter the next year, and just mesh those things together.
Great, that's awesome. I think it's interesting, like the rotation process that you have and the longevity of it. Okay, so then this is another question, but Sherry, I'm going to ask you because if you're there, or anyone who's used the fold scope, but somebody was asking if anyone's used it, how many students can use the set?
I saw that question. I wasn't really quite sure. Like I have a box that has 100 in it, and I feel like 100 students could actually use the microscopes, and they could share, but it's really nice when the student has a microscope all to his or herself. Where you get the bottlenecks would be around like how many slides do you have that you can like save things on, or that kind of thing. And do people have do they have a smartphone, right, where you can actually like take microscopic pictures or videos or things like that, and so I think those are kind of more the bottlenecks than the actual scope itself. But that's limited use. I've only used them really in the context of Fab events, and we've maybe used about 30 to 50 at a time.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing, Sherry.
For us, we had the experience, last month to use them. Like each, we had 50 students, but we split 25 and 25. So we had a workshop of 3 days. The first day, it was actually to build the fold scopes in 1 hour and a half. They brought it home, of course, and we had some iPad to them to show with the iPad, because 7 to 10 they didn't have the phone. And then they extract some strawberry DNA, and they look at the strawberry DNA. And after they look at it, they make the digital picture, and on the third day they create vinyl cut out of it. So they convert the picture with the vector drawings, and they make a picture. And then we had an exhibition with the pictures and the art piece that they created. And I can share it on the video on Instagram, so you can have a look. And it was very fun and very nice for the kids.
That'd be awesome, Ilaria. That sounds really cool. I'd love to see the outcome of it with the final cuts.
Sure, I will share the link.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so then Liz also has a question for the panelists, being how do you create a culture that celebrates failures? And I almost feel like adding to it, Liz, and my kind of thought is like, how do you create a culture that, I don't know that celebrates is the right word, but that is invested in iterations?
I think just like Corey said, it has to start with low stakes situations where if something doesn't work, you move on and you try something else, and then you try something else, and then you try something else, and just keep going until, I think kids get so used to, if they get 80% on a math test, oftentimes they don't get to go back and try to achieve 100%. They feel like it's so summative. But I think with making, you can keep going for long enough that children, they may get, especially young ones, might get to a point where they don't want to do yet another pass. But I think that just building the expectation that you're doing multiple iterations and that you're not getting graded on it, and that you're just seeing how well it works for you and does it achieve your goals, and making it very much your assessment, the child's personal assessment of it can go a long way.
Yeah, having a foot in community and school makerspaces, I can feel the difference. Somebody got me this hat, failure is an option, because it's totally a thing that you need to, I say it all the time. But I think like, the story of how some cultures have 50 words for snow somehow, and hopefully there's another part of the world where they have more words for failure, because a failure, like saying you failed on something in an academic goal in America, is a final event. It's a summative most of the time. Whereas in a makerspace, failure is a part of the learning process. It's a part of moving forward. And I think being able to draw a distinction and destigmatizing that word, you're never going to pull it away from what it means in standard English, but being able to find a way to make sure that students know that the first round is just for learning, and it's okay if it breaks. That's totally fine. Like building that culture and just saying it so often that someone gets you a hat is important.
We say that all data is good data, that you learn, and that every time you try, no matter what the outcome is, you learn. And that's the important part.
May I speak? Sorry. About the errors. Usually when we are working, we share a lot. We stop a lot of times during the process to share. And I think that's a good place to help each other, and to, especially with young children, to make them aware of their mistakes and make it a positive thing to learn in the process, not to be in front of the big failure in the end, but to share and listen to others' ideas during the process. I think it works very nice for us.
Thank you for sharing that, Alexandra. I also noticed in the chat there's somebody, Tim, added fail is equal to first attempt in learning. I appreciate that. And Stephen shared, in our lab, we have a shelf of masterful mistakes. If a student doesn't want to take a project home, we encourage them to leave it on the shelf to share it with future students. I really, really appreciate this. I think that's fantastic. And then Ilaria, thank you for sharing the video as well. That's super. I think it'll be really fun for others to watch. Does anybody else on the panel want to add to this? Okay, I'm gonna ask the next question in the chat then, which is, what are some of the best practices to engage the 13 to 17 age group in the Fab Lab? And even if you don't work with that age group, generally, I have a feeling that others can still add to this. Corey, do you want to maybe start off with this one?
Yeah, I was thinking about it because in a school here, kids, it's in the school library. So like everybody passes by it in the building where I'm at. So kids are always nearby and they wander in just out of curiosity, or maybe because they're finding their way to extend their break from algebra. But there's a whole bunch of reasons why a kid might wander in, but getting them to come in and stay is really getting them to be excited. And so a thing that I keep in my pocket are some quick success experiences where a kid can feel in 10 minutes, they can go from an idea to a thing and they can feel really successful. And it's not like they're the best things in the world and you can get stuck in a loop of doing those for forever, but having those really, really quick wins are really helpful. And then having something that's in short reach of like, if you got just a little bit better, you could do this, right? And giving them sort of that trajectory of how you'd move up from making your first keychain on the laser cutter to making something that's press fit together that you've designed, and like moving through those progressions in a way that feels approachable. It is really important to keep a kid coming back, but the easy, cheap wins are a great way to get started.
I like that, the easy, cheap
Posso?
ones.
Posso?
Vai. Go ahead.
No Brasil, né, como se tem uma cultura da educação tradicional e agora, recentemente, com o uso dos espaços dos laboratórios.
So in Brazil, we have this, as we have this new culture, is something new to use the fabrication spaces, the maker spaces.
Essas alterações metodológicas, os alunos, por iniciativa própria, eles tendem a gostar de qualquer coisa que os torne protagonistas da ação.
So as a novelty, the students tend to like new things, so they tend to like to go to those spaces, and especially because they are protagonists in the actions.
E em especial nas escolas públicas, né? Porque no Brasil existe uma diferença muito grande entre as escolas privadas e as públicas, né? Tem um abismo entre os dois tipos de escola. Então, nas escolas públicas.
So especially in the public schools, because there is this big gap between the private and the public schools. So when you give something new with technology in a public schools, the students tend to really enjoy it and like it, the opportunity.
Porque nas escolas públicas, muitas vezes os professores eles estão desmotivados e continuam a reproduzir aquele método tradicional de ensino. Quando tu apresenta uma metodologia nova, vai, André.
Okay, so the teachers, because of the structure and the public schools, so the teachers most part of the times aren't motivated, so they are tired, they have to struggle a lot, and so they tend to go into the directions of the traditional learning methodologies. So the teaching, it's the same thing, the traditional thing. So when you give that kind of space to students in public schools in Brazil, the students tend to really enjoy it.
Então, a tendência é de trazer que o aluno com essas novas metodologias, ele demonstra um interesse maior, principalmente dos adolescentes.
So it's natural for the adolescents because of that kind of opportunity to enjoy those different types of activities.
I was gonna say, I think that's such a good point, is that giving the space, and like there is something to the novelty that like will like excite adolescent age, like within that age range. I think that's really great. I also wanted to ask Joe. I just met Joe the other day, and I thought that the work that he does was really interesting. And I feel like you could add to this question as well. And if you want to share the work you do.
Absolutely, and I'll give a plug for my presentation tomorrow about using accessing a makerspace without actually really having a makerspace. We use community makerspaces. But to answer your question about like that weird niche of students, you know, and Corey, you kind of hit the nail on the head. The curiosity thing is like really key. You know, you have to get the kids curious about, you know, what's happening. You know, but honestly, I work downtown Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, and work with a group of students that have had challenges getting their diploma. And so we try to embed maker activities from something as small as a keychain, you know, or doing something on a 3D printer to learning how to do a little side hustle. And so the side hustles eventually, I think, could possibly bring students money. So that's one of the things that when they learn that they can hustle and do a vendor show and, you know, have the amount, if it makes a keychain, the kids might say, oh, I'm gonna sell this for 50 cents. So, no, you took time designing it, you know, cutting it, printing it, sanding it, staining it, like you could sell a keychain for 10 bucks. And so once they see the value in that, I think that that's a really critical piece, especially, you know, kids are motivated by what? Money. And so, you know, we started doing some just basic things with, you know, purchasing a Cricut. And so students would, you know, edit, you know, make some t-shirts. They would, you know, design some different things that they could, you know, glam up their Air Force Ones and their Jordans and just, you know, weird different things that the kids connect to. But I think the other piece to it is, you know, it's right, you got to get the kids curious. But the other thing is you have some kids that maybe aren't going to college, but when they can see that some of the skills that they're learning are connected to skills and credentials that could help them in, you know, employment, like that's the critical piece. You know, and you think about, you know, digital fabrication. I think the students that are taking that route in high school, you put them in a digital fabrication, you know, post-secondary place, they're going to be successful. So, but yeah, that's my take on it. And I hope to see you guys tomorrow. We can talk more about what I'm doing here in Pittsburgh through community engagement with our makerspace. So thank you, Alethea, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Sarah, do you want to like add like our pitch for tomorrow? And I just want to say thank you everyone for sharing. It was so great to have such like a different group of people speaking, and to even Andre, thank you for translating for Professor is it Guedes Filho? Is that it? I thought it was fantastic to have you here for that. So thank you, because he had such like awesome anecdotes to add, and it's great to have it so everyone can understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Tomorrow it's the exact same Zoom link. So however you got here, it's how you're going to get to tomorrow as well, from 12 to 4, so noon to 4 Eastern time. And we've got a bunch of different networking opportunities, and then smaller groups will be breaking out into the breakout sessions. So we've had about between like 40 and 48 people on this panel today, which is amazing for the middle of a day on a Thursday. So I look forward to talking to more of you tomorrow in smaller groups and hearing more about the work that you do and the projects that you love. And we are going to sign off. Other than that, thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.